He'd been in the cell for 13 hours, or maybe it was 30. The fluorescent blue glow of the alien light strips didn't change with time, and the air carried that same sterile metal tang, the smell of a place where living things weren't welcome. The shackles around his wrists weren't metal, not exactly. They were some bioreactive polymer that tightened when he moved. He'd learned that the hard way, first hour in. The guards, 8-foot insectoid bastards with jointed arms like black steel cables, didn't talk much. When they did, their voices were like metal plates grinding together. They hadn't asked him a single question yet. They just kept staring at him, scanning him, occasionally chittering to one another in that guttural alien language that sounded like chewing glass. Then, finally, the door opened. The one who came in wasn't a soldier. Too clean. Too delicate. Skin the color of bleached bone, eyes like black oil, tall and impossibly thin. It carried a device in one hand, a floating sphere with rotating blue lights. The translator. It didn't sit down, just stood there, watching him like he was some strange, mildly interesting insect in a jar. Human, it said, the word coming out cold, perfectly enunciated in his language. We want your number. He stared back. My number? The alien tilted its head, an eerily slow movement. Kill count. The words hit like a slap, but he didn't flinch. Why? The alien didn't answer right away. Instead, it took 2 graceful steps forward, close enough for him to smell something faintly sweet and chemical on its skin. Because, it finally said, it determines your value. Value. He almost laughed. They weren't interested in him as a person, not that he expected they would be. To them, he was a statistic, maybe even a prize. The alien's tone was almost bored when it spoke again. Tell us your number, human, and we will decide your fate. He leaned back in the metal chair, let the silence hang heavy between them. His wrists ached in the tightening cuffs, but he didn't give them the satisfaction of moving. What happens if I don't? Then we take you apart, the alien said, like it was stating the weather. He studied its eyes, that bottomless black, and felt something deep in his gut twist. They weren't bluffing. So he asked, What if I give you my number? It gave the smallest shrug, as if the answer was irrelevant. Then the galaxy will know, and so will we. He could feel the tension in the room shift. This wasn't curiosity. This was evaluation. They wanted to measure him like they measured any dangerous weapon, and maybe they were expecting him to give them something low, something manageable. But here's the thing. His number wasn't low, and it wasn't just a number. Every digit was burned into him, every face, every scream, every last moment. He leaned forward, and for the first time since they'd dragged him onto this ship, he smiled. It wasn't friendly. You sure you want to hear it? The alien didn't blink. We insist. He told them. Slowly, calmly, one syllable at a time. When the translator repeated it aloud in their guttural tongue, the guards froze. One of them actually took a step back. The alien holding the sphere didn't move, but he could see it, the faint twitch in its jaw, the shift in its posture. It hadn't expected this. The silence stretched long, and when the alien finally spoke, its voice had changed. Softer. Almost wary. That is not possible. He just kept smiling. You asked for my kill count. You got it. That's when the alarms started blaring outside the cell. The alarms weren't the same pulsing hum of a human siren. They were sharp, high-pitched, and irregular, a sequence of tones designed to get under the skin. The kind of sound that made you feel like your bones were vibrating. It echoed through the corridor outside, bouncing off the metallic walls in chaotic bursts. The alien in front of him, the one who demanded his number, didn't move at first. But its head twitched slightly, eyes narrowing like it was processing a sudden influx of data. The guards reacted instantly, clicking and chittering at each other, their limbs folding and unfolding in nervous jerks. He sat there, chained to the chair, watching them. Whatever was happening, it wasn't part of the script. And that told him something important. He'd just thrown a wrench into their plans. Two of the insectoid guards shifted to block the door, weapons drawn. Long, curved rifles made of some dark alloy that looked older than the walls around them. The alien with the translator finally stepped back, its bony fingers curling tighter around the floating sphere. "What did you say?" it asked, its tone clipped, urgent now. "You heard me the first time," he said, leaning back in the chair as if they weren't armed, as if the alarms weren't screaming. "You wanted my kill count. I gave it to you." The alien moved closer again, almost gliding over the floor. "That number is forbidden in our records. It does not exist. A human cannot—" "Can't what?" he cut in, his voice low, calm but carrying enough edge to slice through its composure. "Can't kill more than your war machines? Can't outmatch your species in combat? Or are you scared to admit a human made that many corpses?" The alien's jaw twitched again, but it didn't answer. Instead, it turned and barked a short, rapid series of clicks to the guards. They reacted instantly. Two of them moved toward him, the polymer cuffs around his wrists tightening further until they bit into his skin. He didn't fight them. Not yet. The cuffs were a problem, but they were also a distraction. They thought they had control. The alien was still speaking, but now it wasn't to him. It was into some sort of thin, crystalline slab pulled from its robes. The translator sphere didn't repeat this conversation. That told him the obvious. Whatever orders it was giving, they didn't want him to know. Through the alarms and the clattering insectoid speech, he caught fragments of something else. Distant thuds, muffled but rhythmic. Heavy impacts, not mechanical, not artificial. Something was boarding the ship. He glanced at the guards. Their posture had shifted from predatory to defensive. One of them actually turned its head toward the sound, its upper arms flexing on instinct. That's when it clicked. The alarms weren't for him. Someone, or something, had just decided this was the perfect moment to crash the party. The alien with the translator finally noticed him watching. "You will remain here," it said, the words sharp, final. "Do not resist. It is for your safety." He almost laughed at that. Safety. He'd killed more than the number they couldn't believe, and now they were telling him to sit tight like some fragile piece of cargo. "Sure," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'll be a good little prisoner." The alien stared at him for a long moment before turning and gliding toward the door. The guards followed, two of them remaining inside to keep him pinned. The others disappeared down the corridor. The moment the door hissed shut behind them, the polymer cuffs around his wrists loosened ever so slightly. Not much, but enough to tell him the system wasn't perfect. He waited. The thuds in the distance grew louder, closer. The alarms hadn't stopped, but now there was another sound. The faint hiss-pop of weapons fire. Alien weapons, not human. They made a distinct, compressed pulse, like air bursting through a narrow tube. The two guards in the room with him shifted uneasily. They didn't know what was coming. That made them sloppy. One moved toward the door, as if expecting to be called out. The other stayed behind him, its long arms resting near the weapon slung across its chest. He moved fast, twisting his wrists hard, He forced the polymer cuffs to tighten, then jerked his arms back and forward in a single violent motion. The material wasn't metal, and under sudden strain it reacted like a tendon snapping. Pain lanced through his wrists, but the cuffs split, one half still wrapped around him. Before the guard behind him could react, he slammed his shoulder backward into its midsection. The thing let out a sharp, metallic screech, stumbling just enough for him to twist around and grab the rifle from its chest. It tried to fight back, but he didn't give it the chance. He drove the butt of the rifle into the base of its neck, a weak point he'd already noticed, and the creature crumpled with a hiss of air escaping its thorax. The other guard was on him in a second, but its movements were wide, telegraphed. He swung the rifle up and squeezed the trigger. The alien weapon didn't kick like a human firearm. It released a concussive pulse that slammed into the guard's torso, sending it into the wall with enough force to dent the metal. Silence fell inside the room. He stood there, breathing slow, the rifle still in his hands. His wrists were raw and bleeding where the cuffs had dug in, but that was a problem for later. The thuds outside were close now. Too close. Something heavy was moving down the corridor, and the sound wasn't like the insectoid's steps. These were heavier, slower, deliberate. The door hissed again, and this time it wasn't one of the bony diplomats or a chittering guard that walked in. It was something else. Tall, broader than even the insectoids, its body armored in dark plates that looked almost organic. The face was hidden behind a mask, smooth, featureless, except for two glowing red slits where eyes should have been. It carried a weapon that made the alien rifles look like toys. The alarms were still going, but the figure didn't seem to notice them. It stepped inside, the door sealing shut behind it. For a second, they just stared at each other. "You're not with them," he said, voice low. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as if assessing him the same way the bony alien had earlier. Then, without warning, it spoke, and the voice that came out was deep, metallic, and in perfect English. "Your number," it said, "was correct." His grip on the rifle tightened. "And how the hell would you know that?" The figure stepped closer, slow, deliberate. "Because," it said, "I counted them." That stopped him cold. "You were there?" "I was," the figure replied, "and now I am here to take you." He didn't move. "Take me where?" The figure's head turned slightly toward the door, as if listening to something outside. "Somewhere your number will matter." He should have asked more questions, should have demanded answers, but before he could, the door exploded inward in a shower of molten metal and sparks. The corridor beyond was chaos, insectoid guards firing wildly, more of the armored figures tearing through them like paper. The one in the room with him didn't hesitate. It grabbed his arm, yanking him forward with inhuman strength. For a split second, he resisted, not because he didn't want to leave, but because he knew that once he stepped through that door, there was no going back. And then the decision was made for him. One of the insectoid guards fired down the corridor, the pulse slamming into the wall inches from his head. He moved. They plunged into the chaos together, the alarms now nothing more than background noise. Somewhere deep inside, he felt it, that old, familiar rush, the one he thought he'd left behind with his last battlefield. He was wrong. The corridor was a blur of flashing lights, smoke, and alien bodies. The armored figure's grip on his arm was like a steel vice, dragging him through the chaos with inhuman precision. Every step was calculated, every movement sharp. He didn't need to be told this wasn't a rescue born out of compassion. It was extraction. He was a package, a weapon they wanted in their hands before the other side could lock him away or worse. Insectoid guards scrambled in every direction. Their weapons hissed with compressed bursts of energy, each shot leaving a sharp ozone stink in the air. But the armored ones, whoever they were, didn't fight like soldiers trained in lines and formations. They fought like predators, darting between cover, closing distance in seconds, tearing enemies apart with blades that seemed to grow out of their armor. The one dragging him barely used its gun. It moved straight into the guards' faces, slicing them down with brutal efficiency. Pulse fire slammed into its armor but didn't slow it down. The impacts left small scorch marks, nothing more. He kept his own stolen rifle tight in his hands, letting instinct take over. A guard popped up from behind a corner. He fired before it could aim, the alien's body collapsing against the wall with a wet insectoid hiss. Another tried to flank them from the ceiling, crawling like a spider. He dropped it with 2 fast shots, its body tumbling down in a heap. It was almost too easy, and that set off alarms in his head louder than the ship's sirens. "These bastards aren't slowing us down," he said over the chaos. "They're hurting us." The armored figure didn't answer, but its head tilted slightly as if acknowledging the point. It changed direction without warning, slamming its shoulder into a bulkhead wall. The metal groaned and cracked before tearing open into a maintenance shaft. "Inside," the voice boomed through the modulated mask. He ducked in, the cramped shaft lit only by the glow of his rifle's power cell. The armored figure followed, sealing the torn metal behind them with a quick, sharp twist of something on its wrist. The sounds of battle outside became muted, replaced by the hum of the ship's inner systems. Pipes ran along the walls, dripping condensation. The air was warmer here, damp, smelling faintly of coolant and alien oil. "Where the hell are we going?" he asked, crawling forward. "Docking ring," the figure said. "Your ship is there." He froze for half a second. "My ship?" "Yes, it has been waiting for you." That was impossible. His ship had been destroyed, atomized during the ambush. He'd seen the explosion himself. He kept crawling, not because he believed it, but because stopping here was suicide. After a few minutes, the shaft opened into a service corridor, narrower than the main halls but tall enough to stand in. The lights here flickered, casting everything in a jittering half-shadow. The armored figure moved ahead, scanning corners with fluid, predatory precision. He followed, rifle up, senses sharp. The distant thuds of battle were still there, muffled through layers of bulkhead. But there was something else too, a low, rhythmic rumble beneath their feet. "They're moving the ship," he said. "Yes," the figure replied. "They are trying to keep us from the ring." "How long until they realize you already cut through their maps?" There was the faintest pause before the answer came. "They already have." As if on cue, the corridor ahead erupted in light. A force field barrier slammed into place, bright blue energy crackling from floor to ceiling. Behind it, 2 insectoid guards emerged, weapons raised. He fired first. The shots hit the barrier and dissolved into harmless sparks. The armored figure didn't hesitate. It dropped to one knee, pressed a palm to the floor, and the plates on its wrist shifted to reveal a small, needle-like tool. It stabbed the tool into the seam between floor panels, and the lights of the barrier flickered. The guards opened fire. Energy pulses slammed into the walls around them, leaving smoking craters in the alloy. One shot grazed his shoulder, heat searing through fabric and skin alike. He hissed but kept his aim steady, firing in tight bursts just to keep their heads down. The armored figure's voice came through the mask, steady, unshaken. "When it drops, run." The barrier flickered again, then collapsed entirely with a sound like breaking glass. They didn't run straight at the guards. They went sideways, into a side passage the guards hadn't been covering. From there, it was 3 steps and a clear line of fire. He dropped the first guard with a headshot. The second tried to retreat but caught a blade through the chest from the armored figure. The corridor opened wider as they moved. The air changed. Cooler now, with the faint tang of space filtration systems. They were getting closer to the docking ring. But then, from ahead, came a sound he'd hoped not to hear again. The metallic, grinding growl of a warden unit. The insectoids didn't send wardens after every prisoner, only the ones too dangerous to risk losing. Wardens weren't soldiers. They were walking execution orders, built taller than most bulkheads, with segmented armor and enough firepower to clear an entire deck. When it stepped into view, it was worse than he remembered. This one was newer, more refined. Its arms ended in twin multi-barrel pulse cannons, its head bristling with sensory arrays, and it moved like it had a brain behind all that machinery. The armored figure slowed, placing itself directly between him and the warden. "Stay behind me." The warden didn't hesitate. Both cannons roared, sending a hail of burning plasma down the corridor. The armored figure moved like liquid metal, sidestepping and deflecting shots with some kind of wrist-mounted energy shield. But he knew they couldn't trade fire here. The warden's cannons would chew through the bulkheads, venting the section to space. "Fall back!" he shouted. The figure ignored him, sprinting forward instead. It closed the distance in seconds, sliding low under the warden's fire and driving both blades into its left leg. Sparks and hydraulic fluid erupted in a burst, the massive machine staggering sideways. That was his opening. He sprinted to the right, dropping to one knee, and fired 3 quick bursts into the cluster of sensors on its head. The first 2 shots bounced off the armor, the third found a seam, and the top half of the sensor dome exploded in a shower of shattered alloy and shattered optics. The warden howled, a deep, mechanical bellow, and swung a massive arm toward him. He barely rolled clear, feeling the air shift from the force of the blow. The armored figure was already climbing up its back, blades ripping into the joint seams between armor plates. The warden staggered again, one leg failing completely. Then, with a final, brutal twist, the figure severed a bundle of thick black cables at the base of its neck. The machine froze mid-step, its cannons still glowing faintly, and then collapsed like a felled building. The figure jumped down, armor slick with oil and sparks still dancing along its blades. "Move!" They didn't look back. The final stretch to the docking ring was clear, too clear. That worried him more than the fight. Empty corridors meant the insectoids had either pulled back for a larger defense or had decided to destroy the section entirely. When they reached the docking hatch, his stomach dropped. It was his ship, or at least what was left of it, rebuilt, reinforced, the hull patched with alien alloys but unmistakable in its shape. The scars of the explosion were still there in places. Someone had salvaged it, pieced it back together. He turned to the armored figure. "You're going to tell me who you are." The figure paused, head tilting again. "Not here, not yet. But you will know soon." Before he could push for more, the docking hatch behind them began to seal. Heavy blast doors slid into place, locking with a deep metallic clang. They weren't the only ones who knew this ship mattered. The blast doors behind them clamped shut with a vibration that he felt through his boots. The sound was final. No one was coming through that way without tearing the ship apart, which meant whatever was coming next, it was happening here. The armored figure moved first, stepping onto the docking bridge between the alien cruiser and his patched-together ship. The bridge was narrow, just a reinforced metal walkway with magnetic seals locking it in place. Beyond it was open void, the distant glimmer of stars twisting against the black. He followed, rifle up, every step deliberate. Halfway across, a deep tremor rattled the bridge. At first he thought it was another blast door cycling. Then the gravity shifted under his feet. Not much, just a subtle pull toward the void. That was enough to tell him the alien cruiser was trying to break the seal on the bridge. "They're detaching us," he said. "Yes," the armored figure replied without looking back. "Run!" They sprinted the last 20 feet, boots clanging on the metal decking. As soon as they crossed into the airlock of his ship, the figure hit the panel. The inner hatch slammed shut, and with a hiss, the bridge detached, sending their ship drifting free. The shuddering stopped, replaced by the low, steady hum of his own ship's systems. It was almost surreal stepping inside. Every corridor, every bulkhead, every handrail was familiar. But wrong. Reinforced. Altered. Some of the walls had alien glyphs etched into the metal where repair plates had been welded. "How the hell is this even here?" he asked, voice low. "I saw it burn." The figure turned to face him, mask still expressionless. "It did. We recovered what was left, rebuilt it, upgraded it." "Why?" There was no hesitation in the answer. "Because you are useful." He almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Useful, that's all I am to you?" "Yes." The figure stepped closer, the red slits of its mask fixed on him. "But usefulness is the only thing that matters in this war." Before he could reply, the ship's alarms began to chirp. Not the alien cruiser's shrill, metallic scream. This was his ship's voice, the one he knew, and it was telling him that they had company. He moved past the figure, heading for the bridge. The controls were familiar, his hands falling into old patterns as he brought up the scanners. The display lit with a cluster of signatures, small, fast-moving vessels breaking away from the alien cruiser. Pursuit craft. "They're coming in hot," he said. "I will deal with them," the figure replied, stepping toward the weapons console. He shot the figure a look. "You can fly, right?" "Yes, but I kill better than I fly." "Fair enough." The ship's engines roared to life, the deck vibrating under his boots. He angled them hard away from the cruiser, pulling into a tight spin to throw off targeting locks. The pursuit craft adjusted instantly, holding formation like predators scenting blood. "They'll keep pace," he muttered. "They're faster, lighter." "Then make them chase you into a kill zone," the figure said, hands already moving over the weapons panel. He didn't have to think long. There was a debris field 2,000 clicks out, the remnants of some ancient battle, drifting in unstable orbits, dangerous to navigate, but perfect for losing pursuers. He pushed the engines to full, the stars streaking outside the viewports. The alien craft closed in, their weapons spitting green energy bursts that flared against the shields. The figure didn't waste shots. Every time a target came into view, it fired a single pulse from the ship's railgun. The weapon's thunder shook the entire frame, and each shot tore through a pursuing craft like paper. But there were too many. The debris field loomed ahead, jagged fragments of hulls, twisted beams, and shattered armor drifting like a graveyard in the dark. He plunged them into it without slowing down. The ship's proximity alarms screamed as they weaved between wreckage, shards of metal scraping the shields. The alien craft followed, but their formation broke, the field forcing them to split apart. "Now," the figure said. He threw the ship into a sudden drift turn, swinging them sideways through a narrow gap. One of the pursuing craft tried to follow, and slammed straight into a massive slab of ancient armor plating, detonating in a burst of white fire. The figure's shots took 2 more in rapid succession. The rest began to pull back, unwilling to risk the chase deeper into the field. The scanner cleared. They were alone again. He let out a slow breath, easing the ship into a calmer trajectory. His hand still gripped the controls tight, his pulse steady but sharp. The fight wasn't over. It never was. The armored figure stepped up beside him. "We have a few hours before they track us again." "Plenty of time for you to start explaining," he said. It was silent for a long moment. Then, "You are not the only human they fear. But you are the only one still alive who carries that number." "That kill count," he said, his voice flat. "Yes. It is not just a record. It is a key. And they know if it falls into the wrong hands, it will open something they cannot control." He turned in his chair to face it fully. "What exactly are we talking about opening?" The figure tilted its head, those red slits bright in the dim bridge light. "A war older than your species." The words settled in his gut like lead. He'd been in wars his whole life, but this sounded like something that didn't end until there was nothing left standing. "Then you'd better tell me everything," he said. "Because if they're hunting me for a number, I need to know why I'm worth killing this badly." The figure didn't move, but he could feel the weight in the air shift. Whatever came next wasn't going to be simple or survivable. The armored figure didn't speak right away. Instead, it walked to the forward viewport, standing with its hands clasped behind its back like someone preparing for an unpleasant confession. The dim red slits in its mask reflected the faint light of the drifting debris outside. "The war I'm speaking of," it said finally, "did not start with your species, but humans accelerated it." He leaned back in the pilot's chair, arms crossed. "So we're the new kid on the block who stumbled into a fight already going on?" "Yes," the figure replied. "But you didn't stumble. You were recruited." That word cut deeper than he expected. "Recruited by who?" The figure didn't turn. "By the side that lost." His mind worked fast, running through possibilities. In every war, there's always a side that's been beaten down, stripped of resources, desperate enough to gamble on something risky. In this case, humans, and him in particular. "You're saying they used us," he said, voice low. "They still do," the figure said, "but the difference is, you were never meant to survive long enough to understand." That landed like a stone in his gut. It made sense. It explained why his missions had always been borderline suicidal, why command had pushed him into situations no sane tactician would approve. They weren't expecting him to come back. They were just using him to cut down as much of the enemy as possible before he burned out. Except he hadn't burned out. He stood, walking toward the figure until they were only a few feet apart. "So that kill count, the number they're scared of, that's because I've been doing their work?" "Yes," the figure said simply. "But you did it too well." That brought him up short. Too well. The way it said it didn't sound like praise. It sounded like an accusation. The figure turned then, facing him fully. "When you passed a certain threshold, your number became a signal." "A signal for what?" The figure's voice lowered, almost like it didn't want the ship to hear. "For a weapon, not one you can fire, but one you can awaken." He stared at it, trying to read any emotion from the expressionless mask. "And what exactly does it wake up?" "Something buried," the figure said. "Something that will change the balance of this war, for everyone." He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. The galaxy was big enough to hide a lot of horrors, but the way the figure spoke made it clear. This wasn't just a bomb or a fleet. It was something far older, far worse. "You're telling me I've been killing my way toward unlocking a doomsday weapon," he said. "Yes." And now both sides want me. One to use it, the other to keep it buried? Yes. He let out a bitter laugh. Perfect. Just perfect. The figure stepped closer. You have a choice now. Keep running, and eventually they will catch you. Or come with me, and we find it first. Find it so you can use it? To end this, the figure said, one way or another. That wasn't exactly reassuring, but before he could press the issue, the ship's console beeped, long, steady, and unmistakable. He moved to the controls and brought up the scanner. A single contact. Not a fleet, not a swarm. Just one ship. It was big. Bigger than anything the insectoids normally fielded in pursuit missions. And it wasn't closing fast. It was holding position just at the edge of sensor range. They've found us, he said. No, the figure said, its voice oddly calm. That is not them. He glanced over his shoulder. You sure? Yes, that ship belongs to someone else, someone who has been looking for you much longer. His gut tightened. Friend or enemy? That depends on how you greet them. The contact edged a little closer, enough for the scanners to fill in the outline. It was unlike any vessel he'd seen before, curved hull plating, no visible weapon ports, and an odd asymmetry to its design, like it had been grown rather than built. The comms crackled suddenly. No encryption, no formal hail, just a voice, male, deep, and rough. Pilot of the human vessel, it said. Shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. He flicked the comms off and turned to the figure. I'm guessing that's not a request we want to follow. No, the figure said. If they board, you will not leave alive. His mind was already running scenarios. The big ship outmassed them heavily. In a straight fight, it could crush them without effort. Which meant the only real option was to move now, before it got into weapons range. He fired up the engines, swinging the ship into a sharp brake away from the contact. The inertial compensators strained, pressing him into the seat as the stars twisted outside. The big ship didn't chase. It didn't need to. Instead, it deployed something. The scanners lit up with a dozen small, fast-moving contacts, drones or fighters, but not like the insectoid craft from before. These moved with unnatural precision, cutting off escape vectors before he even plotted them. The armored figure was already at the weapons console. They will try to disable, not destroy. That gives us a chance. He gritted his teeth. Then we'd better make it count. The first drone came in from above, diving across the viewport like a hunting bird. The figure's railgun shot punched straight through it, scattering molten debris into the void. The second and third came in from opposite sides. He rolled the ship hard, the inertial harness biting into his shoulders as they passed close enough to rattle the hull. The fight was fast, brutal, and close, the kind where one mistake meant the end. And through it all, he kept thinking about that number, that damned number that had dragged him into this, whatever it unlocked. It was close enough now that everyone was willing to kill to control it. And he was right in the middle. The drones were fast, almost too fast for his reflexes. They darted in from blind angles, vanishing and reappearing on the scanners in bursts of impossible acceleration. He yanked the ship into a corkscrewing roll, forcing two of them to overcommit. The armored figure took the shot, the railgun booming through the hull as one drone disintegrated and the other spun away, trailing sparks and leaking atmosphere. That's 3 down, the figure said. 9 left. Feels like 90, he muttered, swinging the ship hard under a drifting slab of debris. The debris shielded them for a second, enough for him to see the pattern. The drones weren't random. They were boxing him in, herding him toward a kill zone where the big ship could disable them clean. He'd seen this tactic before, back when his enemies had been human. He didn't like it then, and he sure as hell didn't like it now. Hold tight, he said, and shoved the throttle to full. They shot straight toward the densest cluster of drones. On the scanners, it looked suicidal. In reality, it was the only gap in the net, narrow, unstable, but there. The drones reacted instantly, converging to block the path. The figure fired again, the railgun's recoil shuddering through the hull. 2 drones vanished in white fire. He rolled the ship between the remaining ones, scraping the shield so hard the alarms screamed in protest. For a moment, they were clear. Then the big ship moved. It didn't chase, it pivoted. A section of its hull opened like a blooming flower, revealing something that made his gut clench. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. No barrels, no missile pods, just a smooth black sphere suspended in a web of glowing filaments. The scanners went haywire the second it came online. Systems flickered, displays dimmed. Even the controls felt heavier under his hands, like something was dragging against them. "They're jamming our ship," he said. The armored figure's voice was calm, but harder now. "Not jamming. Locking." "Locking what?" "You." Before he could ask what that meant, the black sphere pulsed. The pulse wasn't visible, not really, but he felt it, a bone-deep vibration that made his teeth ache. The cockpit lights dimmed. His skin prickled like every hair on his body wanted to stand on end. The figure moved from the weapons console to stand beside him. "This is not about destroying you," it said. "They are calling to the signal inside you." His grip tightened on the controls. "The one tied to my number." "Yes." Another pulse, stronger. For half a second his vision blurred, not from the ship's movement, from something inside his own head. A memory surfaced unbidden. The aftermath of a battle years ago, standing in a field of bodies, the air thick with smoke and the stink of blood. He'd looked at the scene then and felt something. Not pride, not shame, something colder. The same cold was stirring in him now. He shook his head hard, forcing his focus back. "If they're calling it, can we shut it out?" "No," the figure said. "We can only outrun it." The problem was, the big ship was positioned perfectly. Any escape route went through its line of influence, and with the pulses coming faster, the longer they stayed here, the more of that cold, creeping feeling would dig into him. The next drone wave came in tighter, as if sensing his hesitation. He threw the ship into a sharp climb, skimming along the top edge of the debris field. The drones followed, relentless. "Give me a clean path," he snapped. The figure's shots were precise, surgical. Every blast from the railgun tore another hole in the pursuing pack, but more kept coming. They weren't endless, just enough to keep him from gaining momentum. "On your left," the figure called. He banked hard, skimming past a shattered alien hull big enough to blot out the stars. The big ship was ahead now, still pulsing that black sphere, still dragging at him in ways he couldn't fight off much longer. One last opening. He poured everything into the engines, heat warnings flaring across the console. The hull groaned under the strain, but the ship surged forward, tearing through the narrow gap between 2 closing drones. The big ship loomed. The sphere pulsed again. For a split second, he felt the urge to cut engines, to stop fighting, to just let it take him. The thought was almost seductive. An end to the chase, an end to the war. Then the figure's hand slammed down on his shoulder, grounding him back in reality. "Now!" He shoved the throttle to the red line and kicked the maneuvering thrusters sideways, skimming along the big ship's hull, so close he could see every glowing seam in its armor. The pulse weakened, not gone, but dulled as they broke free of its direct line. The moment they were clear, the figure unleashed the railgun into one of the ship's exposed filaments. The shot struck deep, and for the first time, the big ship flinched, its sphere flickering, its pulses stuttering. That was all they needed. He angled them away at full burn, pushing the engines past safe limits until the stars stretched and the sensors stopped screaming. Only when the scanner showed empty space did he ease back. His hands were steady, but his breathing wasn't. The cold inside him hadn't left. It was just quieter now, waiting. The figure stood silent for a moment, then finally spoke. That was their first attempt. It will not be their last. He glanced over. And when they try again? The figure's head tilted, the red slits unblinking. Then we either find what your number unlocks, or die before they do. The cockpit was silent, except for the faint hum of the engines cooling under the strain he'd just put them through. His hands were still on the controls, knuckles pale against the worn grips. The armored figure stood behind him like a shadow, unmoving, watching the empty black outside. That cold inside him, the thing the black sphere had tried to stir, wasn't gone. It felt like a quiet animal now, crouched somewhere deep in his chest, waiting for someone to open the cage. Finally, he broke the silence. You've been vague about this weapon my number unlocks. You've been vague about everything. That ends now. The figure didn't flinch. If I told you everything at once, you wouldn't believe it. Try me. It stepped forward, the armor shifting slightly as it moved. The war began long before your species had even learned to speak. Two sides, one to rule, one to resist. Over centuries, both built weapons, machines, plagues, planet burners, but there was one creation that neither side could control. He frowned. And I'm guessing that's what we're talking about. Yes, a construct, but alive in its own way. It learned from every battle, every kill. It grew stronger the more death it was near. That is why it was buried, because nothing could stop it once it woke. He leaned back in his chair, processing. So how does my kill count come into it? The figure's head tilted. It is drawn to death. Not just the kind left by one hand. Your number is high enough to trigger its awareness. It will know you. He let out a humorless laugh. Great. A galaxy-killing thing that wants to be my pen pal. It will not want to talk, the figure said flatly. And you think we can use this thing? I think we can make it choose a side, the figure replied. And I know which side will win if it chooses the other. He studied the faceless mask for a moment, then turned back to the controls. So where is it? There was the slightest pause before the answer came. Buried in a dead system, a star that collapsed in on itself long ago. The gravity there makes navigation. Dangerous? He smirked. Dangerous is my specialty. The figure didn't share the humor. It will not just be the gravity. Both sides know the location. Neither has dared go in without a way to wake it. And now they know I exist, he said, piecing it together, which means the race is on. Yes, he set the course without hesitation. Then we stop wasting time. The ship hummed as it adjusted, the nav computer plotting a route toward the dead system. It would take hours, even at full burn. He'd learned in war that hours were enough time for everything to go wrong. He left the bridge and moved through the corridors of his rebuilt ship. Every step was a reminder of what had been taken from him, his old crew gone, his old life gone. And now, someone had welded alien metal into the bones of what was left, turning it into something half his and half stolen. In the small armory, he checked over the weapons. The stolen alien rifle from his capture was still in perfect shape, humming faintly when powered. He strapped it to his back along with 2 human sidearms, a combat knife, and 3 spare magazines. When he returned to the bridge, the figure was still at the viewport, watching the streaking stars. You prepare for a fight, it said. I prepare for every fight, he replied. It tilted its head. Good, because they will be waiting for us there. They dropped out of faster than light at the edge of the dead system. Immediately, the view outside shifted from bright pinpricks of stars to a warped, oppressive darkness. The collapsed star at the center wasn't visible in the usual sense. It was an absence, a tear in space where light seemed to bend and vanish. Around it, debris drifted in slow, unnatural arcs, pulled by a gravity that didn't obey normal rules. The sensors struggled to give clear readings. Whole sectors of the display fuzzed into static. "Friendly place," he muttered. The figure moved to the weapons station without being told. "2 contacts," it said. "1 insectoid, 1 other." He tightened his grip on the controls. "Other?" "They were the ones chasing us before," the figure said. "The ones with the black sphere." "Of course, they'd both beaten him here. Or maybe they'd never left." "Any sign they've gone inside?" he asked. "Number." They wait. He studied the readings. The 2 ships weren't close to each other, but they were positioned like sentries, each guarding a different vector toward the dead star. If he approached one, the other would close in from behind. "They want to force me to pick a side," he said. "They want to force you into a trap," the figure corrected. He thought for a moment, eyes narrowing. "Then we don't go in from either vector. We make our own door." The figure's head tilted, red slits brightening slightly. "You would fly through the distortion field?" Distortion field was putting it mildly. It was the space where the dead star's gravity twisted reality so hard that ships could break apart just from passing through. But it was also the one place neither enemy ship would dare to follow. He keyed in the course. "Strap in." The ship shuddered as they angled toward the black maw of the distortion. The controls fought him immediately. The pull wasn't like gravity. It was like the whole ship was sliding toward a whirlpool. He compensated, throttle steady, reading every twitch of the hull through the vibrations in the frame. Alarms blared as the temperature in the forward plating spiked from the strain. The figure said nothing, but he could feel its gaze on him. Then, just as the distortion threatened to pull them into a spin, they broke through. The space inside was eerily calm. No debris, no light, just a vast, silent void. At the center was something he couldn't fully see, not because it was hidden, but because his eyes refused to make sense of it. Shapes that weren't shapes, moving without moving, shadows that hinted at impossible size. His stomach knotted. He didn't need to be told. "That's it," he said quietly. "Yes," the figure replied, "and now it knows you're here." The moment the figure said it knows you're here, the air in the cockpit felt heavier. Not physically, not in any way the ship's systems could measure, but inside him. That quiet animal he'd been carrying since the black sphere pulsed was no longer crouched. It was pacing. And it wasn't waiting for someone to open the cage anymore. It was rattling the bars. The thing at the center of the void didn't glow, didn't move, didn't send out a signal he could track. But he felt it watching, like a predator behind the brush line, gauging whether he was worth the leap. His hands stayed tight on the controls, every instinct telling him not to drift closer. But every other instinct, the one forged in years of battle, told him if he turned back now, there wouldn't be another chance. The armored figure stood beside him, motionless. "Do you feel it?" "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "Feels like standing on the edge of a cliff in the dark, waiting for someone to push." "It is not pushing," the figure said. "It is waiting for you to jump." He shot the figure a sharp look. "And if I do, then it will follow." The implication was clear. And dangerous. If this thing followed him out of here, it wouldn't stop. Not until it had done whatever it existed to do. But there was no time to decide in peace. The sensors flickered, momentarily clearing enough to show both enemy ships moving in, the insectoids from one side, the black sphere hunters from the other. They'd given up waiting for him to choose, and were now racing to force him. "They're both coming in hot," he said. "Yes," the figure replied. "They will not fire near it, not yet. They will try to take you alive." "That's comforting," he muttered, flipping switches on the weapons panel. "Means I can shoot first." The insectoids were closer, their spindly ships angling like blades toward the distortion field. He fired the railgun, not aiming for kills, aiming for intimidation. The shots punched through the void, slamming into their forward shields in bursts of white light. They swerved but didn't slow. The black sphere ship was hanging back, holding position just outside the distortion's worst turbulence. The sphere wasn't active yet, but he could feel it would be soon. Then the thing at the center pulsed. It wasn't light or sound. It was a sensation, a deep vibration that rattled through him harder than the black sphere had. For a fraction of a second, he wasn't in the cockpit. He was back in every battlefield he'd ever stood on, every kill flashing in sharp, bloody detail, every decision that had led him here laid bare like wounds. When his vision snapped back, his hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a terrible, electric clarity. The figure was watching him closely. "It touched you." "It's not just watching," he said, his voice tight. "It's measuring." The insectoid ships closed the gap fast, their weapons shifting from lethal to stun pulses, wide, crackling nets of energy designed to fry systems without destroying them. He rolled the ship hard, weaving through the arcs as the figure returned fire with mechanical precision. A net burst caught the rear quarter of the ship, shields flaring and sputtering for a heartbeat before recovering. "They're trying to box us," he growled. "Then break the box," the figure said. He didn't need telling twice. He kicked the ship into a tight, upward spiral, forcing the insectoids to adjust their formation. The move opened a narrow line, straight toward the black sphere ship. "That's suicide," the figure said flatly. "Not if I'm right," he replied. The black sphere ship powered up the device as they closed. He felt the first pulse building, but before it could release, the thing at the center of the void pulsed again. Stronger. The black sphere's glow flickered. Its pulse fired, but instead of hitting him, the energy warped mid-space, curving toward the void's heart. The figure turned sharply toward the viewport. "It is interfering." "Yeah," he said grimly, "and I think it's calling me in." The insectoids hesitated now, their formation breaking as they readjusted. The black sphere ship didn't move forward. Didn't dare. Whatever was in the center, both sides feared it enough to keep their distance, but it wasn't keeping him at a distance. "Your choice," the figure said. "Go to it, and nothing will be the same again. Or turn away, and they will take you." He stared into the black at the heart of the system. The thing wasn't showing itself, not yet, but he could feel the tension between them, like two predators circling. "Strap in," he said. The ship angled nose first toward the center. The distortion made the controls sluggish, like flying through thick oil. Systems flashed warnings he ignored. The pulses came faster now, not from the black sphere behind him, but from the heart ahead. And with each one, the cold animal inside him stretched, yawned, came closer to the surface. He crossed some invisible threshold, and suddenly, there was light. Not light from a star, not mechanical light. This was raw, living brightness that didn't belong in space, pouring out of something so vast his mind couldn't hold the full shape. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't alive in any way he understood. But it moved, unfolding like wings across half the void. The armored figure's voice dropped to a whisper. "It remembers you." He didn't ask how that was possible. The truth was already humming in his bones. The thing didn't just know his number. It had been there. It had felt each kill like a drop in a bucket, and now the bucket had overflowed. The insectoids pulled back entirely. The black sphere ship powered down its device. Neither dared interfere. The figure stepped closer to him. If you speak to it, it will hear. If you command it, it will act. And if I don't, then it will choose for itself. He didn't know what made him do it. Maybe instinct, maybe madness, but he placed his hand on the control yoke and, without words, thought toward it. The reaction was instant. The thing's wings, or whatever they were, shifted, and the space between them filled with motion. Ships, not made but born, flowing out into the void like predators from a nest. Each one moved with the same impossible precision he'd seen in the drones, but there was no hesitation, no mercy. They weren't his ships, not exactly, but they were here because of him. The figure's voice was calm now, almost satisfied. You have woken it. The insectoids fled first, their ship scattering into the distortion's edge. The black sphere vessel lingered only long enough to watch one of the new creations tear apart a fleeing cruiser. Then it turned and ran. The battlefield was his, or rather, theirs. The thing didn't speak in words, but he felt its attention like a sunbeam focused on a single point. It wasn't asking for orders. It was waiting for direction. And here was the truth he didn't want to admit. Part of him wanted to unleash it, to let it sweep across the war like fire in a dry forest, to finish what he'd been doing all his life, but on a scale no one had ever seen. He glanced at the figure. If I set it loose, there's no going back. The figure didn't look away from the viewport. There never was. The cold inside him was warm now, burning, alive. He looked into the endless black wings and gave the only order that felt natural. Go. The response was immediate. The things it had birthed surged outward, faster than light, vanishing toward every corner of the galaxy. The armored figure finally turned to him. Now they will fear you more than they fear each other. He exhaled slowly. Good. Let them. Outside, the thing folded its wings, retreating back into the void like a shadow fading at dawn. But he knew it wasn't gone. It was with him now. Wherever he went, it would be waiting to hear his next order. And deep down, he already knew he'd give it one. The war wasn't ending. It was just changing sides.